It's Wednesday, April 17th. I'm Priyanka Arabindi.
And I'm Josie Duffy-Rice, and this is What a Day, where we also think you should be banned from Disney parks if you lie about having a disability.
Yeah, that is the bare minimum. If you're telling that kind of lie to get to the front of the line, much worse things are coming to you than being banned from that park. Let me just tell you that.
You need to talk to someone.
Yes.
Let's just do a self-examination, you know?
Reevaluate everything.
Everything. On today's show, the FISA bill that includes warrantless surveillance awaits a vote from the Senate. Plus, your daily dose of Trump's hush money trial.
But first, another day, another chaotic moment for House Republicans. This time, it's over House Speaker Mike Johnson's decision to bring wartime aid for Ukraine up for a vote in the House. There is a bit of a backstory here. So back in February, lawmakers in the Senate passed a $95 billion foreign aid bill to send money to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. But it has gone nowhere in the House. And that is because the Republican Party's hard right flank is vehemently opposed to sending more money to Ukraine. They were already mad at Johnson for working with Democrats to pass a government spending bill to keep the government open, and they are just getting madder. One of these far-right Republicans, none other than Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I feel bad even saying that, Josie. To even think that you're from the same state is upsetting.
I know, it's very dark.
Anyways, she got the ball rolling a few weeks ago on what is called a motion to vacate, basically to force a vote on ousting Johnson from his role. This, as you probably remember, is the same action that Republicans used to oust the last speaker, Kevin McCarthy, just last year. It took them weeks to land on Johnson as the new speaker and was incredibly embarrassing for everybody involved.
I feel like you and I could be elected speaker if we wait long enough, you know.
The chances aren't zero at this point.
They're not zero. So how did we end up here with Johnson facing the prospect of a very undignified and embarrassing ouster a la Kevin McCarthy?
It wasn't exactly unexpected, but after Iran launched a drone and missile attack over the weekend against Israel, Speaker Johnson said that he would bring up that foreign aid bill, albeit divided into separate pieces. And this hard right group is not happy with that. Another right-wing Republican, Kentucky's Thomas Massie, said Tuesday that he is ready to back MTG's effort to oust Johnson. And look, because of existing House rules and because House Republicans have such a slim majority, just 2 votes at this point, dwindling down to 1 by the end of the week, it would not take many to kick him out at all unless some Democrats end up coming to Johnson's rescue. So to set the scene for what things are like on the Hill right now, get a little inside look at what's happening, I spoke to Joan Greve. She is a senior political reporter for The Guardian and went to my high school. Shout out Hinsdale Central. Love that. I started by asking her why so many Republicans aren't happy with Johnson and his plan to pass foreign aid.
Despite the fact that there's widespread displeasure about Mike Johnson within the House Republican Conference, currently the pool of people who are willing to oust him is small, and that's largely just because the chaos that they experienced last October when they were without a speaker is still looming so large in their minds that most of them aren't willing to risk going through that again. The reason why so many House Republicans are less than happy about this plan for the foreign aid bills is because many of them are very critical of sending more money to Ukraine. And that would be at least one piece of this broader plan that Johnson has. Essentially, Johnson wants to split up the foreign aid package that already passed the Senate into 4 separate bills. But it would still involve, if it passed the House, sending tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine. And that is something that a lot of House Republicans, potentially even a majority of House Republicans, don't really want to do at this point. And the frustration over that has led 2 members of the House Republican Conference, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, to call for Johnson's removal. And because the House Republican majority is now so narrow, after another member resigns on Friday, it will actually be just down to 1 member. It is seeming like Johnson's job is potentially threatened right now, and he might have to rely on Democrats to actually get him out.
I want to ask you, you brought up Kevin McCarthy very briefly. How does, the party's criticism of Johnson here compare to that of McCarthy, who preceded him?
It's really interesting because I feel like it boils down to some of the exact same issues that cost Kevin McCarthy his job last year. The reason why Matt Gaetz, the hard-right congressman of Florida, was so frustrated with McCarthy was because he had pushed through at the last minute a large government funding package to avoid a shutdown. And Matt Gaetz was incredibly frustrated by that because he thought that the package was both rushed and ill-conceived, basically. And on top of that, he was also really frustrated by the fact that McCarthy seemed to be in conversations with the Biden administration about approving more money for Ukraine. It's basically the exact same issues that are once again dividing the Republican conference. We saw last month that the House passed 2 large government funding bills to provide funding for the federal government through the rest of the fiscal year. There were a lot of people in the House Republican conference who were frustrated by that, particularly with that second funding package. And also now that Johnson is moving forward with this plan to hold a vote on Ukraine aid, that is something that many House Republicans also don't want to see happen. So it is telling that once again, these 2 issues, government funding and Ukraine funding, are really animating the House Republican conference and might, in fact, oust another speaker.
As a Capitol Hill reporter, it almost seems like chaos from the outside looking in. But would you say that this is Congress as usual, just par for the course, or is this particularly chaotic?
I would say it's particularly chaotic, and that's really saying something. I think Congress has set a pretty high bar for chaos in the past several years. And even so, this is notably chaotic. When Kevin McCarthy was ousted from his job back in October, that was the first time in history that a House Speaker had ever been formally removed from that position. And now we're looking at the possibility that might happen twice, one session of Congress, which is just pretty mind-boggling. There was also some stories last year, one of which was written by me, about the fact that this session of Congress has been historically unproductive.
Right.
It has failed to pass so many basic bills. And that was one of the reasons why I think that Johnson really felt compelled to pass those government funding bills last month, even though they were unpopular with many members of his conference, because it really does feel like some House Republican leaders just feel like we need to do something because we have not been able to achieve much of anything with this narrow majority and with our conference being as divided as it is.
And obviously, looming large on everything this year is Donald Trump. How much power does he have in all of this? Obviously, he and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene usually in lockstep with each other. But in this case, they seem to be on opposite sides. Last week saw Trump giving some kind of lukewarm support for Johnson during his visit to Mar-a-Lago. We actually have a clip.
We're getting along very well with the speaker. It's not an easy situation for any speaker. I think he's doing a very good job. He's doing about as good as you're going to do.
So what do we think is going on there?
First of all, I would say about as good as you're going to do isn't the highest of endorsements that somebody can offer. But it was telling that Johnson flew to Mar-a-Lago for that event with Trump, because he himself is tacitly acknowledging that Trump really holds the keys to the entire party. If Trump went on Truth Social today and said, I have turned against Mike Johnson and I think that he is no longer fit to be speaker, I do think we would see then a much higher number of House Republicans willing to come out and say, okay, maybe we should consider the motion to vacate. But I don't know that Trump's very tacit support alone is going to be enough to save Johnson necessarily. And that's partly because the majority is so narrow. It takes so few people in order for this to become a huge issue. And it's also because Johnson has just done a lot of things in the past few months to really irritate members of his conference, particularly the hard right members. And I don't know that Trump's, lukewarm endorsement is going to be enough to assuage some of their concerns. One thing that Johnson has been doing recently, and what he did with the government funding bills, is that he passed them using this mechanism called suspension of the rules. What that allows you to do is circumvent some of the usual requirements for getting to a final vote in the House, which means that he has been relying on support from Democrats to get these bills through. And that has been really irksome to some of the hard right members who feel like they aren't doing anything with their majority.
Right. And I mean, you are talking about Democrats helping out here. You mentioned that it might take some to actually save Mike Johnson's speakership. Is it possible, though, that in the midst of all this chaos, that Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries could have a shot at the speakership, given just how slim the majority is?
Right now, I would say that the likelihood is still slim. But that being said, back in October, the likelihood of Mike Johnson becoming speaker also appeared to be near zero when Kevin McCarthy lost his job. And now here we are. So, never rule anything out. For the time being, there are a handful of more centrist members of the House Democratic Caucus who are saying that they will come to Johnson's assistance if the motion to vacate comes up for a vote. If we find ourselves in a scenario where Johnson is ousted and Republicans can't come up with somebody else to fill that role, they had an incredibly difficult time doing that last time around, then maybe there is a scenario in which some House Republicans choose to vote either for Jeffries or simply vote present and bring that number down to the point where Jeffries could become speaker. The majority is so narrow for Republicans that we can't totally rule it out.
Right. I want to zoom out for just a moment because we're talking about politics, but there's a lot of real world impact that congressional dysfunction and inability to get things done has beyond the speakership. So what would you say are the main ways we're suffering because of this?
There was a really fascinating story that came out in the past couple of months about the fact that there are reports of Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines who are looking at their phones for updates on whether the House was going to pass the foreign aid package passed by the Senate. And I feel like that really just underscores the fact that there are so many people around the world who are looking at what the House is doing and more often than not doing. And it really has some profound consequences around the world. You know, for Ukraine specifically, the Senate passed a foreign aid package that would have sent them about $60 billion in February. If the House had quickly taken that up, some of that money could have already been directed over there.
Right. And just switching gears a little bit, House Republicans also submitted impeachment articles to the Senate for Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. What should we make of all of that kind of going on the side?
Yes, that is one thing they've been able to get done, just barely. But yes,
Barely.
The House back in February approved 2 articles of impeachment against the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Democrats have just been outraged over this impeachment process because they say it's entirely political. They've demeaned it as just a political stunt. The House Republicans say that the impeachment was necessary because Mayorkas has been, quote unquote, mishandling the U.S.-Mexican border. And Democrats say that that is pretty much BS and that Republicans are making what is a political and policy debate about what is the best way to approach the U.S.-Mexican border. And they are transforming that into this crusade against one member of Joe Biden's cabinet. And the fact that the House was able to, approve these articles of impeachment, it really isn't going to come to much because they have now officially moved to the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats. And the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, has already indicated that he's going to move for a very quick dismissal of these charges.
That was my chat with Joan Greve, senior political reporter for The Guardian.
Thank you, Priyanka. One of the things the House did pass last week is a reauthorization of Section 702, which is part of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. On Friday, the House passed a 2-year reauthorization of this part of the law, which includes controversial surveillance that has bipartisan support and bipartisan critics. Now the bill has to pass the Senate before it expires this Friday. The law gives the U.S. government permission to obtain vast amounts of intelligence and communication within the broad category of foreign intelligence information. And it gets to do this all without getting a warrant.
Right. Okay. So that should send everyone's senses.
Spidey senses.
They're
spidey.
Exactly. They're going up a little bit.
They're going up.
Before we get into this fully, tell us a little bit about this law. What do we need to know?
Yeah, so FISA was passed in 1978, but Section 702 specifically was born out of the post-September 11th era. This was when former President George W. Bush secretly ordered a wiretapping operation codenamed Stellar Wind, which I feel like is a very beautiful code name for a very terrible thing.
Yes.
And basically his administration was recording people without getting a judge's permission first, with no warrant. And instead of reining in the former president's brazen violation of privacy, Congress decided to legalize it by passing Section 702. The law has now been reauthorized multiple times over the years. In 2017, it was reauthorized for 6 years. And in December of 2023, Congress granted a 4-month extension. And that brings us to now.
Okay, so what does this look like in practice?
Yeah, so technically, Section 702 gives Congress the ability to obtain intelligence of foreign targets, including when those people are interacting with Americans. In practice, that means, according to the New York Times, quote, the National Security Agency can order email services like Google to turn over copies of all messages in the accounts of any foreign user, and network operators like AT&T to intercept and furnish copies of any phone calls, texts, and internet communications to or from a foreign target. So basically, they can get a lot of information.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, the idea of a target is a very broad category that they are always trying to broaden a little bit more.
Right.
So as an American citizen, if you're communicating with someone abroad who is of any interest to American intelligence, that basically means your information is also fair game, no warrant necessary. This is all even though violating your privacy without a warrant is very explicitly prohibited in the Constitution. The founders thought about this. So it's a little bit concerning.
Definitely. I mean, more than a little bit. So you said that this has bipartisan supporters and critics. Tell us more about where people are falling on this.
Yeah, it's actually been Republicans who have been loudly critical of the law, especially recently. In fact, last week, 19 House Republicans broke with their party to prevent the bill from coming to the floor for a vote after Donald Trump posted, quote, kill FISA on Truth Social. But by last Friday, all 19 of them decided to support the bill's passage after House Speaker Mike Johnson reduced the reauthorization from 5 years to 2, among other kind of minor concessions. A warrant requirement was not one of them, which is what many people wanted the law to add, including founders of this country. They wanted warrants.
Very interesting here. I know many on the left have been critical of this law for years. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of activists, a lot of media outlets, and some elected officials, including congresspeople. A number of senators, like Oregon Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Bernie Sanders, have spoken out against this law or tried to prevent it from coming to a vote. And Wyden stated, quote, "History shows that intelligence agencies will use every inch of authority Congress provides to spy on Americans." And he called the bill, quote, "a breathtaking expansion of Section 702, which should terrify anyone who cares about Americans' rights." But still, yes, there are dissenting voices, but most congresspeople in both parties supported this law overwhelmingly. Susan Collins and Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney have been quoted in the past few days saying it must pass. This is how we catch terrorists. This is critical for American espionage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So I want to rewind a little back to that breathtaking expansion that you mentioned. I know there was a controversial change made to the bill by the House. Tell us more about that.
Yes, very controversial and pretty alarming, among other amendments that were kind of snuck in by House leadership, including one that vastly expands the ability to surveil migrants. The House also included language that expanded what kind of companies and services would be compelled to turn over information to the government. So according to the American Prospect, the government could now compel companies as far-reaching as office buildings, landlords, and even the backbone of the internet, such as data centers. Data centers, kind of a general term, but it encompasses a lot of storage of private information of regular civilians. This is basically where all of our information is stored, in data centers. And so if this actually goes through the Senate, it's going to have really major implications.
Got it.
The Senate is expected to vote on this bill in the next day or two, and we will keep you posted. But that is the latest for now. We will be back after some ads. What a Day is brought to you by Lomi. Turn your food waste into nutrient-rich plant food with Lomi. Lomi is the biggest innovation in the modern-day kitchen since the dishwasher. It's a smart and simple solution to turn food scraps into plant food. I, as you know, have gotten Lomis for basically everybody I love. This makes me feel like I'm helping the planet and also making myself more of a Earth girl.
I see the vision, Josie.
You see the vision.
I do.
You know I'm not totally executing.
But you're in the vicinity. It's cool.
I am.
The
only reason I'm in the vicinity is because of Lomi.
Listen, shout out to Lomi. Whether you want to start making a positive environmental impact like Josie on the world or just grow a beautiful garden, Lomi is perfect for you. Head to lomi.com/WAD and use the promo code WAD to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/WAD and use promo code WAD at checkout. Thank you, Lomi, for sponsoring this episode.
What a Day is brought to you by Fast Growing Trees. Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S., with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers. They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. Plus, Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever.
We love Fast Growing Trees here. I keep telling you that the mini plants that I've gotten from these folks are yet hanging on. And that's not because I have a green thumb, okay? This spring, Fast Growing Trees, they have the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code WAD at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WAD at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WAD. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply.
What a Day is sponsored by Ramp. Ramp is the corporate card and spend management software designed to simplify your business finances across expenses, vendor payments, and accounting.
With Ramp, you're able to issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions and automate expense reporting so you can stop wasting time at the end of every single month. And now get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/WAD. That is ramp.com/WAD. ramp.com/WAD. Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. Let's wrap up with some headlines.
Headlines.
First, an update to the story we brought you yesterday. The Supreme Court is signaling that it may hand some January 6th rioters a major win. It's a case that could upend hundreds of the Justice Department's prosecutions tied to the riot, including the federal election interference case against former President Donald Trump. On Tuesday, the court considered whether the Justice Department incorrectly stretched a federal law when it charged some of the people who stormed the Capitol with the crime of obstructing an official proceeding. Some of the court's conservative justices seem to think that the Justice Department went too far. Here is Justice Neil Gorsuch during oral arguments, asking the government's lawyer about what might qualify as obstruction.
Would a heckler in today's audience qualify, or at the State of the Union address? Would pulling a fire alarm before a vote qualify for 20 years in federal prison?
More than 100 rioters have already been convicted and sentenced under the law in question, while hundreds more have been charged. If the court decides in favor of the rioters, it could knock out 2 of the 4 charges Trump is facing in his federal insurrection case. The court is expected to make its final ruling in June.
A federal appeals court ruled on Tuesday that West Virginia cannot enforce its law banning transgender women and girls from competing in sports in public schools, including colleges. The ruling does not block the Save Women's Sports Act altogether, but it specifically bars the state from enforcing the law against now 13-year-old Becky Pepper Jackson, a trans girl who was on the track and field team at her middle school. Pepper Jackson's family sued the state in 2021 to protect their daughter's spot on the team after the act was signed into law. And after plenty of back and forth in the lower courts, a panel of federal judges decided yesterday that the law violated Pepper Jackson's Title IX rights. So even though the law hasn't been struck down entirely, this is still a win for LGBTQ+ advocates challenging anti-trans laws in GOP-led states across the country. West Virginia officials will likely appeal yesterday's decision to the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court that on Monday allowed Idaho's gender-affirming care ban to remain in effect.
Okay, I hate that part, but for now, happy for Becky Pepper Jackson.
Yeah.
Run your heart out.
Great news.
Even though
Truly.
we don't really understand the desire to do the running, we love it for you.
We love it for you. Run for us.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on Tuesday that the U.S. will enforce new sanctions on Iran. The U.S. is penalizing Iran for Saturday's drone and missile attacks on Israel. Yellen told reporters that the department, along with China, G7 partners, and others, is looking to destabilize Iran's ability to export oil.
We don't preview our sanctions tools, but in discussions I've had, all options to disrupt terrorist financing of Iran continue to be on the table.
The U.S. already has plenty of ongoing sanctions with Iran. A 2023 report from the Congressional Research Service said the U.S. sanctions on Iran are some of the most extensive ones that the U.S. imposes on any country. And that is because of cited concerns from the U.S., including Iran's nuclear program, its proxy groups, and other human rights violations.
And now for the Trump trial update. Sorry, folks. This will be going on for a few weeks, and with as many pending trials, maybe longer than that. The second day of jury selection ended with surprisingly 7 jurors. In order to get a full jury, they need a panel of 12 and also 6 alternates. So they are off to a surprisingly quick start.
Yeah.
I did not expect them to get 7 jurors that quickly. Also, 2 wonderful things happened again. Trump appeared to be asleep for the second day in a row.
Yeah, this man's going to be so well rested after this trial.
Truly. And Trump was scolded yet again by Judge Merchan after audibly reacting to one of the jurors. Not ideal. The court takes a break today, but on Thursday, I think we can expect more of the same.
If Joe Biden publicly fell asleep in a situation like this, we would not hear the end of it. And I'm sorry, not nearly enough people are giving Donald Trump shit for being an old man who fell asleep in public, his own trial. It's insane. It is insane.
There would be a full congressional investigation.
Yes.
Of Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
Right. They'd be investigating Hunter Biden for Joe Biden falling asleep at the table.
Yes, precisely.
Right.
And those are the headlines.
One more thing before we go. Are you a Crooked Media mega fan? Do you love the Crooked brand and our mission? Do you want to influence everything from merch designs to our digital content to what Lovett eats for lunch? Okay, that last one is out of our hands. He's ordering Panda Express and no one can stop him. But for the rest of it, you can join Crooked Insiders. The first step is to fill out a survey about your Crooked podcast preferences. What a day, what a day, what a day. Once that's completed, you are in. There is no second step. We will reach out to you and we need your opinion, and you'll get a promo code to our store every time you participate.
Whoa.
So go to crooked.com/insiders to join today.
Stuff the ballot box with What a Day.
What a day.
You'll just keep getting discounts.
Election fraud for What a Day.
That is all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, do not lie at Disneyland, and tell your friends to listen.
And if you're into reading and not just transcripts from the House floor, like me, What a Day is also a nightly newsletter, so check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Josie Duffy Rice.
I'm Priyanka Arabindi, and we would never fall asleep in court. Absolutely never. I was praying.
I was praying.
That's what I'd be doing.
Reminds me of when they were like, what's your favorite Bible verse? And Trump was like, all of them.
All of it. All of it.
I love all of it. It's all very good.
I would love it if he did an audiobook of his gold Bible.
Amazing. Incredible.
That would be something.
Oh my God.
Maybe an idea for him. It's a free one.
What a Day is a production of Crooked Media. It's recorded and mixed by Bill Lance. Our associate producers are Raven Yamamoto and Natalie Bettendorf. We had production help today from Leo Duran, Greg Walters, and Julia Clare. Our showrunner is Erica Morrison, and our executive producer is Adrian Hill. Our theme music is by Colin Gilliard and Kashaka.
You can start your day off right when you find a professional on Angie to get your plumbing right first. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Visit Angie.com. You can do this when you Angie that.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. With the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers. In fact, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/podcast free. All lowercase, shopify.com/podcast free, shopify.com/podcast free.